Welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL. Taking a look at pitching for tonight's 14-game slate, and completely different from the crapshoot we had last night. So finally some decent options up top, and kind of a lot of variety of ways you can go.
Yeah, and I was kind of wishing that maybe one or two of these pitchers would have went last night so we could actually have someone we have confidence in. But instead we have like 7-8 pitchers that we could, feel pretty confident in tonight. So it's going to be one of those nights where it's, ownership is pretty split up because there are a lot of different routes you can take. So hopefully we'll break it down to you and give you the best shot at assembling a nice lineup tonight.
Definitely. Yankees-Orioles, first one here, Nathan Eovaldi, Chris Tillman. Two guys who have kind of overachieved this season in comparison to years past. Over-under of 8. It's in Camden Yards. Baltimore -121 favorites. Neither of these guys really pop up on my radar just because of tonight's slate, but I think we can kind of touch on maybe in the past we've kind of looked at this game as a possible stacking option, but because these guys have pitched so well this year, Eovaldi's been tough on right-handers, that maybe it takes some bigger names in this series out of play.
Yeah, I think that's basically the takeaway from this matchup. I mean, even though Tillman's been good this season, you really can't justify that price. Doesn't have a high enough strikeout rate, and the matchup against the Yankees really isn't that great. The flip side, Eovaldi's just been awesome as of late. Looks like he's finally starting to come around. I mean, we always knew that he was a high-velocity guy, but some of his secondary pitches are coming around, which is pretty inspiring for his long-term value. I think you can theoretically put him in a GPP if you're trying to be extra sneaky, just because he's on fire right now. And as you said, he's pinning down right-handed bats, and that's basically all Baltimore has with the exception of Chris Davis. So, I mean, if you can go out there with a ton of confidence and, kind of leak that over from some of his past starts, I can see him putting up a pretty solid line and be a pretty sneaky pick.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think what kind of only turns me off is just there's some guys around him that I like a little bit more. But I definitely do think if you're building multiple lineups that you kind of maybe take a shot at him because he is going to be low owned just because Camden Yards has been a bandbox for offense this season. And you look at this Orioles team, and of course they have upside, but they also have a pretty high strikeout rate against right-handed pitching, so there is something there. Next game here, you got the Brewers and Phillies, and this one on both sides, intriguing options. Jimmy Nelson versus Vincent Velasquez, 7.5 over/under. Philly just -110 favorites there, so pretty close to a pick 'em. And this one, it's kind of site dependent there for Jimmy Nelson. His price tag on DraftKings at 10.5, completely different from 8,000 on FanDuel. And both these guys are in great spots, and I think both are very deployable in GPPs.
Yeah, and I think the emphasis on there is GPPs because there are a lot of pitchers in this range. I mean, that's essentially where we're going to be looking for the most part today is between that 9K, 8K range on FanDuel, maybe 10K to 8,500 on DraftKings is where all the quality pitchers are, the best bang for the buck tonight. So these two are definitely within that, but neither of them really have a clear path to victory as this is kind of a pick 'em. They're pulling away from each other in that regard. But I absolutely love the upside for both of them. I mean, Velasquez, he's been a strikeout machine this season, well over 1 strikeout per inning so far on this campaign. And then Jimmy Nelson going against a bottom 5 offense in Philadelphia, and he's been awesome as of late. So, I mean, you can plausibly roll out either of these guys and feel confident about it. And I really like Nelson's price on FanDuel. If you need a little bit of that salary cap relief, he's about 1,000 less from guys like Velasquez, Drew Pomeranz, and other guys like that. So if you need that extra $1,000 or if you want to be different, I really like that strategy in GPPs.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with Velasquez, I mean, that strikeout rate, I mean, obviously through the roof this year. And I think this matchup with the Brewers, I mean, they have a strikeout rate over 25% this season against right-handers. And, I mean, it would not be a stretch. I would not be surprised to see if he comes in 8+ and nearing kind of double-digit strikeouts on tonight's slate.
Right. You love that upside, and the Brewers second in the league in strikeout rate. So, I mean, it all really kind of adds up for him.
Yeah, definitely. Next one here, you got Angels and Pirates, Jered Weaver versus Francisco Liriano. Over-under of 8 here, Pittsburgh -156 favorites. Liriano was a guy who we were talking about before the show. I'm never quite on him, and we're joking around that I only play him against the Cardinals because that seems to be who he's done well against for the most part. The walk rate's still a big concern, but I think at the price tag on DraftKings, it kind of makes him an interesting choice at 7,900. A pretty strong favorite there. I expect the Pirates to kind of get to Weaver. And, because he's not over 8,500, he doesn't need a monster strikeout performance to kind of match the price tag.
Right. I think he's a pretty good chance of getting a win, even though he's only a -160. I think he's going to get plenty of run support, as you mentioned. Jered Weaver, definitely someone to target against when you're looking at hitters tonight. He's one of those guys that he's kind of in that range with Pomeranz, Velasquez, Nelson, everyone else, and I think I like those names more, cash games and maybe as a GPP preference, but keep him on the board if you're rolling out multiple tournament lineups. That's the only way I'm really seeing him into my lineup tonight.
Yeah, and his price tag on FanDuel, 9,400. Are we talking kind of just strictly DK here?
Yeah.
Next game here, you got Blue Jays and Red Sox, over-under of 9. Boston -172 favorites. David Price versus R.A. Dickey. And, this is any game that the Sox are involved in just seems to become a stay away, mainly because, one, their pitching has been awful, but in the red-hot offense, it's just these games look like football scores come the end of the night.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, this is the 4th time, I believe, that Boston is facing R.A. Dickey this season. Obviously, they faced him a ton in the past, too, had pretty decent results. So I'm expecting a short outing from him tonight, especially in Fenway Park. I don't think the knuckleball and his fly ball rate really translates well there. So that's an easy, safe stay away. And then David Price, on the other hand, he just faced Toronto in his last start and not very good results. As per the usual, unfortunately, this season. And, good park factor there in Boston. It's hard to really justify that price point, especially with several cheaper pitchers that, present a better per dollar value tonight.
Yeah, definitely. There's just way too many other options. You look at Toronto, that heavily right-handed lineup, and a couple of those guys have had good success against Price in the past, so kind of just an avoid game altogether, or for pitching as well. Next one here, you got Royals and Indians, Edinson Volquez, Danny Salazar. Cleveland -169 favorites there. In Cleveland, over-under is 7.5. Volquez is a guy who, you're not really looking at on tonight's slate. Salazar, he's a guy who I don't think people are really going to talk about, just because I think there are a lot of obvious options in this Kansas City Royals offense. Still kind of carries that name appeal, is not providing a lot of upside, but I don't know. Salazar could be kind of a low-owned pick tonight. You look at this KC offense. They're pretty banged up. There's a lot of names in there that aren't usually in the starting lineup. So I think Salazar could be an interesting GPP for.
Yeah, and I almost wrote him up in the pitching polls. I probably should have put him in an also consider section because I do really like him in GPPs. And I think this Kansas City offense is pretty overrated at this point in the season. They have a couple injuries. They're underperforming here and there. Granted, they kind of picked things up this last most recent series. But, Salazar, you look at the last time he faced Kansas City, he was just on fire. 7.2 innings, 4 hits, 9 strikeouts, 62 fantasy points on DraftKings. So if you want to read into that a little bit, he kind of has Kansas City's number. And this isn't the same Kansas City offense that we saw during their very, very good stretch, their playoff run last season. So there's a little bit of GPP credits over to Salazar tonight. And I kind of like him, I'd say, more than Liriano and some of those guys in that GPP category.
Yeah, I definitely agree. His price tag on DraftKings is 8,600, so I think that dynamic pricing that they got going on is kind of considering the Royals of the past. So I think at that price tag, he's a justifiable option in GPPs. And, overall, a ground ball rate of 50%, a K percentage, north of 28. That's kind of just an elite number right there. Next game here, you got Mets and Marlins, and Noah Syndergaard taking on this Miami team here who has been struggling of late, banged up as well, facing Tom Kohler, so it looks like he's in a good spot to get a win. And he kind of comes in, I mean, obviously as kind of that number one option on the night for me. DK, I mean, you can make some arguments about the price tag as far as dropping down if you wanted to, but FanDuel, I mean, he's just kind of an easy plug and play in cash games.
Yeah, I really like him there. As we mentioned, DraftKings has a dynamic pricing. It's always priced up there, whereas FanDuel, I think a lot of their pricing has to do with pure fantasy point performances. And if you recall, Syndergaard was tossed in his last start against the Dodgers after just about 2 innings, and then he made a relief appearance just a few days later to keep him fresh against the White Sox. So he's only pitched 3 innings in his last 2 performances, which obviously you're not going to have the same high fantasy point totals like your 60s that he had been getting before that. So that's why he's priced down on FanDuel, and I think you can really take advantage of that because this is a guy who probably should be about $12K on FanDuel like he is over on DraftKings. So, I mean, consider you have a savings of $1,500. He's in a pitcher-friendly ballpark, and he's an elite pitcher. I think it's a strong case for him tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Kershaw's obviously been number one, but I don't think people realize how close Thor is to Kershaw-type numbers this season. I mean, it's been absolutely unreal. On the other side, Tom Kohler, I mean, I think he's going to be a guy who kind of provides some GPP bats. I mean, kind of your average right-handed arm.
Yep, I agree with that. I mean, the Mets haven't been hot lately. It's a pitcher-friendly park, but, I mean, I don't think you can count him out against Kohler. He's had a couple blow-up performances this season.
Yeah, definitely. Next one here, you got White Sox and Tigers, Carlos Rodon, Jordan Zimmerman. Over-under of 9, Detroit minus 132 favorites, and you were kind of hesitant on that over-under. But is that an indicator of just kind of maybe a stay-away game altogether on tonight's slate, hitters and pitchers?
I think so. I think you can definitely stay away from both of these pitchers. I mean, Rodon going against Detroit's righty-heavy lineup that can blow up any left-hander. I mean, no matter who they're facing, even though Rodon's been pretty good this year. But Zimmerman, as we kind of said before the show, we were talking back and forth, he's just not right. He has a groin issue that he's trying to play through. He was dominant to begin the season, obviously not the same pitcher at this point in the year. So that's an easy stay away for his price point. And then the fact that Vegas doesn't like either of these guys, I think you can look at some of the opposing bats if the price is right. I'm not going to just, stumble over myself to get these hitters in the lineup. But I think some of those Detroit righties, if the price is right, I might get them in. Yeah,
I think so too. I mean, kind of crazy. I mean, I know Justin Upton hasn't been anything close to what he usually has, but 2,700 on DK. I mean, I'll toss him at GPP. I mean, that 0, it's not that bad if you take it at 2,700. Next game here, you got the Nationals and Reds. Gio Gonzalez versus Brandon Finnegan. Over under of 8.5. Washington minus 171 favorites. I think on a different slate, if there were kind of less pitchers to go with, Gio would kind of catch my eye here. But he's kind of priced around a lot of guys that I like far more and just in better ballparks as well. Obviously, the Reds are coming off a Coors series, coming back home. But I think this game, I'm just kind of looking more so at the Washington bats, if anything, from this game in general.
Yeah, and Gio on the road is kind of a different pitcher than Gio at home. He's been up and down lately, so I think there's a lot of better options for that same price point. And then I know you're stacking against Brandon Finnegan tonight, as you wrote in your stacking the Washington Nationals to win article today. And that's a really good call in my opinion, too. I'm going to try and get some exposure there because they have one of the higher team totals of the night. A good park shift there and a Great American Ballpark, Cincinnati.
Yeah, they've hit lefties, pretty well this season. Yeah, they have some up and down bats, but second in the league in WOBA against lefties so far. So,
and they're very affordable too. Guys like Rendon, Worth.
Yeah, definitely.
You can put them in.
Yeah, I think Zimmerman's price tag on DK is the only thing that, I have something to gripe about. But overall, I can't complain. Next game here, we have the Mariners and Rangers, 8.5 over under. Texas minus 136 favorites. Taijuan Walker, Yu Darvish on the hill. Yu Darvish, a really strong debut against a pretty good Pirates team at home. Now he's going to face the Mariners, who have been really, red hot coming in, and really 1 through 7. Guys like Adam Lind have kind of picked it up. I get Franklin Gutierrez, who's on a nice tear. I still think he's worth a look. I mean, he looked good in that debut, and I think certainly in GPPs you're going to get him at kind of low ownership just because of how good Seattle's been.
Right, and I think we're kind of ranking GPP options now, and I would go Danny Salazar 1 on that list, Yu Darvish a close second, and then maybe Francisco Liriano. So that's kind of where they sit. And the only reason I have Darvish behind Salazar has to do with park factor there in Texas. The opponent Seattle does have some home run hitters in Seager, Cano, Cruz. And then he might be limited to 85, 95 pitches, which really isn't all that bad considering that's, usually what a normal starter throws. But the fact that there's more upside with Salazar going over 100, maybe 110 pitches, if it really comes down to it, is something I'll side with more in GPPs, but I certainly like Darvish too if you're making multiple tournament entries.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like 85 to 95 is what they project. So, I mean, that's kind of a decent number. I don't have a problem because his price has dropped from that last start. So, but as you mentioned, I mean, Salazar below him is kind of a better option. I still kind of rather take up to Velasquez as well. Walker on their side, I mean, I'm kind of just weirded out by that 5,900 price tag. I mean, do I want to take some Texas bats against him? I mean, they got a high total. Guys like Profar leading off isn't a bad value option. I mean, are you kind of looking to target against him tonight?
I think maybe in a couple spots, like you said, Profar for some value, and then maybe one more bat if I could fit it in nicely. But I don't really know who to go with. I mean, Fielder hasn't been that great. You don't like the opportunity cost at first base. And it's just hard to – I mean, maybe the rookie there in Texas, I don't know how to say his name. Zara, yeah. Thanks for bailing me out there. I think that's probably one of the better cash game plays in there. Walker he's so up and down. It's unbelievable. And then on the road, Texas has one of the higher offensive totals of the night. It's just tough. It's tough to have any faith in him, especially even though he has that very affordable price on DraftKings. I mean, I'll pick some bats against him before I play him in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, he's given up 8 homers in the last 5 starts, which is concerning. So in Texas, I mean, that's not a good sign. Next game here, you got the Rays and Twins. Jake Odorizzi versus Ricky Nolasco. A little bit of weather concern, but we were checking it might trail off and maybe a late start or a little delay or something. But Jake Odorizzi, I mean, a decent matchup here. He's, done a little bit better of late since that blow up earlier this against the A's. But lately, I mean, pretty solid back-to-back starts of 20-plus DK points. Once again, I mean, he kind of sits in that range of all these options we've been talking about. But in a good spot against the Twins, I think he is going to be kind of the lower owned out of all those names there.
Yeah, he looks like he's in a great spot, everything considered. And I really like him tonight in all formats. But, I mean, it's just the rain factor, and you consider that there are a lot of pitchers at that same price point that you can pivot to safely. I mean, that's just really what has me steering away from him. Obviously, check the forecast as we get closer to game time. Looks like about an 80% chance, maybe the first hour or two as we get into that game. Then it kind of trails off to 20%, then up around 40%. So pretty questionable if you want to risk that in cash games. And like I said, there are a lot of safe pivots. Even though Odorizzi does have a great matchup, I don't know if I can risk that with the information that I have right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Next one here, you got the A's and Astros. Jesse,
you're not going to talk about Ricky Nolasco?
Why would I talk about Ricky Nolasco? We got to keep this under 30 minutes.
You like Evan Longoria against him or something?
I don't know. I mean, I could take some guys, but you look at this Rays lineup. I mean, they've been fairly boomer bust.
Yeah, they're not playing very well lately. I mean, Longoria is probably the only one I would consider realistically, and his price is jacked up. And there's a lot of other really solid third basemen you can go with too. So it's really tough there, even though Nolasco's really been kind of trailing into the gas can we all know and love lately.
Yeah, and that bullpen behind him. I mean, if he exits early, it's kind of a similar situation to Cincinnati where that party's going to continue well after the starter goes.
Yeah.
But next one here, you got the A's and Astros in Minute Maid Park. Jesse Hahn versus Doug Fister. We were talking about Hahn before. I mean, kind of that guy who, I mean, you want to target against him heavily, but he really hasn't been that bad. I mean, he's not a reliable option to talk about tonight, but I think, taking hitters against him, maybe you kind of limit more than you usually would.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, it's tempting to load up on some Astro hitters at home. They're playing pretty decently, but price is kind of up. Hahn has a solid ground ball rate. It's really kind of tough. So I'm reserving them to more GPP options. Maybe put them in a cash game here and there, mix and match. But I'm not really loading up on the Astros today. Same thing on the other side. Doug Fister has a similar profile. I mean, he's not good. Sometimes he gets bit pretty hard, but he's not bad. I mean, against this Oakland lineup, too. Maybe Danny Valencia, Stephen Vogt, if you can get him for cheap, because this is a really good park boost to left-handers. But other than that, I mean, they're even borderline cash there. And I think it's kind of a stay-away game. As weird as it sounds for a game in Houston, a relatively high total, two mediocre pitchers, but they're just not bad, and they kind of keep the ball in the yard. So add it all together, and I think you can take hitters from this game, but, I mean, just don't limit yourself.
I think points per dollar-wise, I'm a little more on the A's, just because they are the cheaper price tag, and Fister has struggled against lefties this year. So guys like Vogt are kind of intriguing.
Yeah. So you're looking at Vogt, maybe Valencia or anyone else?
Yeah, I like Valencia. If Coco Chris was in the top of the lineup, he's not a bad value price there. Next game here, we got the Giants and Cardinals. Johnny Cueto versus Adam Wainwright. I think this is a game that's just kind of a stay away altogether.
Yeah, I agree. We were talking before the show. Wainwright's price is kind of tempting. His last three starts have been actually pretty serviceable, where you think you could look to him maybe in tournaments, but full slate like tonight, a lot of other really good options. No Coors game where you don't have to pay up or feel obligated to pay up, I should say. And the Giants just don't strike out. So we were saying maybe a stat line of 5 innings, 2 or 3 strikeouts, 2 or 3 earned runs for Wainwright seems pretty plausible tonight. And then you have Cueto on the other side on the road against this lefty-heavy St. Louis team. It's really hard to justify his price tag, too. So looks like a stay away all around. You don't want to target hitters against two pretty good pitchers. But, yeah, it's just a stay away.
Yeah, out of 14-game slate, this one just kind of gets lost. Next one here, you got the Braves and Dodgers. Julio Teheran versus Kenta Maeda. Over under 7. Dodgers, big favorites here, minus 188. This one, I think it's kind of in the same lines of the Cardinals and Giants, just because Teheran's pitched pretty well this season. And usually he's a guy we've maybe taken some lefties on in the past. But this season, I mean, not so much. And I think Maeda on the other side of his price tag, I'm not really on it, even against the Braves offense.
Yeah, and the Braves don't strike out a ton or as much as you think they would for being a bottom 5 offense as they are. And Maeda doesn't really have much strikeout upside built in as well. So you're really kind of limiting yourself, and you're hoping for a win there if you're taking him. And I think your upside already is a lot lower than similarly priced options to begin the game. So then on the other side, I think, yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there, where you could take a couple lefties if they fit in your lineup for the Dodgers. But, I mean, Teheran has kind of proven himself this year, so don't force that in and look to stack against him.
Yeah, definitely. Next one here, 1040, Rockies and Padres. Chris Russin versus Drew Pomeranz. And this might be the first time all year that Pomeranz is actually a steady, somewhat favorite, because we were talking about his opponents that he's faced this year. A lot of good aces on the other side, a lot of good teams, and for as well as he's pitched, I'm kind of all in on him tonight against this Rockies team that are heading to Petco. You may not have noticed over the last 2 games, but Petco is a decent pitcher's park, and I think Pomeranz is kind of just a safe number 2 option, price considered in cash games for me.
Right, and you look at San Diego. That's an interesting point you raised. That I've seen a lot of back and forth on Twitter that San Diego is a pitcher-friendly park. It isn't, whatever. I mean, even if you take the last 2 games out, the truth of the matter is it's death to right-handed hitters with that big left field. But it's kind of neutral, maybe a little below average against lefties and left-handed hitters, that is. And Pomerantz being a left-handed pitcher, I mean, you're dealing more with right-handed platoon hitters of Colorado, which is really a step down from how they perform against righties. You take that, combine it with they're on the road. They're a much worse team on the road. And I think Pomerantz looks great tonight. Earlier this season, he shut down the Rockies in Coors. Obviously a candidate to do that again. And as we were kind of mentioning before the show, Rich Hill and Drew Pomerantz are kind of the all-hipster pitching team of the West Coast there, both for some underrated ball clubs, or I guess I should say not noticed teams like the Padres and the Athletics, but both kind of stepping to the forefront as the aces on those teams, or at least the best pitchers so far this season.
So maybe I'm just going to become a baseball hipster and get a Pomeranz and Rich Hill jersey and hang up in the back.
Hey, I'm right there with you. Maybe we can get a 2-for-1 deal on both of those. So
yeah, we got to check that out. They have to have them like on, I'm not saying the clearance rack is disrespect to them, but because they're low selling jerseys, I mean, we should be able to find those for pretty cheap.
The only problem maybe is maybe they don't mass produce those yet because they're not popular enough. So then we have to go in and customize them and get the name on the back. Sometimes that can be more expensive. So
that's true. Maybe we should just switch the number to like their highest FanDuel score, and then we get people to notice because we'll start wearing it.
I like that.
So that's going to wrap things up here with the Pitcher Nail Down. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.